The stars had belonged to the Aari for longer than most species could remember. 50,000 years they had ruled, their luminous forms drifting through the cosmos like living light. They moved between worlds without ships, appeared and disappeared at will, and reshaped matter with a gesture. To the countless billions who lived under their dominion, they were not merely powerful. They were gods. On 10,000 worlds, temples reached toward the sky. Priests chanted prayers in the old tongue, begging for blessings that sometimes came. The Aari demanded little, really. Obedience, worship, the occasional tribute of rare materials or beautiful artifacts. In return, they maintained order across the galaxy. Pirates vanished in bursts of divine fire. Plagues disappeared under their healing touch. Rebellions ended before they began. The Aari themselves had long since forgotten they were anything but divine. Their records stretched back so far that their origins had become myth even to them. They knew they were eternal. They knew they were supreme. They knew the universe itself bent to their will. These were not beliefs. These were facts proven across millennia. High Archon Zalthran floated in the grand chamber of the Eternal Conclave, his form pulsing with golden radiance. Around him, the other Archons shimmered in their appointed colors. Ruby red for Velshara, sapphire blue for Krenthos, emerald green for Lysandra. Together they had ruled for 10,000 years, and would rule for 10,000 more. The harvest worlds report favorable yields, Krenthos announced, his voice like distant thunder. The Velkan Prime system offers their finest crystals as tribute. Acceptable, Zalthran replied. The faithful shall be blessed with another century of prosperity. It was routine. It had always been routine. The galaxy turned, species rose and fell, but the Aari remained constant, eternal, perfect. Then the sensors detected something new. The alert was subtle at first. A minor fluctuation in the outer regions of their space. A vessel had emerged from faster-than-light travel. This was not unusual. Many species possessed crude FTL drives. What was unusual was that this vessel had not immediately transmitted the ritual prayers of passage. Justicar Thelmoran received the assignment personally. He was young by Aari standards, barely 8,000 years old, but he had proven his devotion to the Eternal Dominion. His form burned with white-hot intensity as he manifested aboard his enforcement vessel, a sleek craft of impossible geometry that seemed to exist in more dimensions than 3. Identify the intruders, he commanded his subordinates. The response came quickly. They call themselves humans, Justicar. Unknown species, no record in the archives. They travel in primitive fusion drive vessels. 1 large colony ship, 3 smaller escorts. Thelmoran felt something he rarely experienced: curiosity. A new species was always interesting, if only briefly. They would kneel, or they would burn. Most chose to kneel. He reached out across the void with his consciousness, touching the primitive communication systems of the human ships. His voice would boom through their corridors, shake their bulkheads, fill them with appropriate awe. Primitive beings, he announced, allowing his power to resonate through every syllable. You have entered the domain of the Aari Collective. We are the eternal rulers of this galaxy. We are the masters of space and time. We are gods made manifest. There was a pause. Thelmoran felt the electromagnetic chatter increase. Among the human vessels, good, they were discussing their surrender. Then a voice responded. Female. Calm. Disturbingly calm. This is Captain Elena Vasquez of the colony ship, Defiant Hope. We are refugees from Earth seeking a new home. We have 50,000 civilians aboard. We request permission to negotiate settlement rights in unclaimed systems. Negotiate? Thelmoran's radiance flickered with confusion. The word itself was foreign to him in this context. One did not negotiate with gods. One received their commands with gratitude. You misunderstand your position, he said, his voice hardening. There are no unclaimed systems. All belongs to the Aari. You will exit your vessels and present yourselves on the nearest suitable moon. There you will prostrate yourselves and await our judgment. Your ships and all they contain now belong to the collective. Another pause. Longer this time. Respectfully, Justicar, we decline, Captain Vasquez said. Humanity does not kneel to anyone. We will gladly share resources, establish trade, recognize your territorial claims where they are actively used. But we will not surrender our freedom or our ships. For a moment, Thelmoran could not process what he had heard. In 8,000 years, no one had ever refused him. Defied the Aari? Impossible. This must be a translation error, some quirk of their primitive language systems. You refuse? He asked, his form blazing brighter. We refuse, Vasquez confirmed. Thelmaran's confusion transformed into something else. Anger. How dare these primitives, these insects, these newcomers reject the divine order? Did they not understand what they faced? He would have to teach them. He gave the command, and his ship moved into attack position. The 3 human escort vessels immediately raised their energy shields, crude electromagnetic barriers that would barely slow his weapons. How pathetic. Perhaps a demonstration will clarify your situation, Thelmaran said. His ship released a pulse of concentrated energy, a mere fraction of its true power. The pulse crossed the distance in seconds and struck the lead escort vessel. The shield held for perhaps 2 seconds before collapsing. The ship's hull glowed white, then red, then simply ceased to exist. Atoms scattered into the void. That vessel contained 200 of your species, Thelmaran announced. Your refusal has made you responsible for their deaths. On the defiant hope, Elena Vasquez gripped her command chair hard enough to make her knuckles white. Around her, the bridge crew worked in horrified silence. The Zhenghe had just vanished. 200 people. Gone in an instant, Justicar, she said, fighting to keep her voice steady. You have just committed an act of war against humanity. Thelmaran actually laughed, a sound like shattering crystal. War? There is no war between a god and an insect. There is only obedience or extinction. He fired again. The escort ship Magellan tried to evade, its chemical thrusters firing desperately. It made no difference. The divine fire found it anyway. Another flash of light. Another 200 souls erased from existence. You have one final escort, Thelmaran said. And then I will begin targeting your colony ship. Section by section. I will kill 1,000 at a time until you comply. Choose quickly. Elena looked at her tactical officer, Lieutenant Okonkwo. The young man's face was ashen, but his hands moved steadily across his console. He had been analyzing the Justicar's weapons, the energy signatures, everything their sensors could detect. Captain, he whispered, I'm picking up something strange. That vessel, the one we thought was somehow magical or supernatural, it's reading as technology. Very advanced, but it's using energy sources I recognize. Fusion matrices, quantum coupling, things we've theorized about but never built. Elena felt something shift in her chest. Technology, not magic, not miracles, technology, are you certain? She asked quietly. Positive, ma'am. His shields operate on phase-shifted harmonics. His weapons are focused plasma streams. It's all technology, just far beyond anything we've developed. But technology can be analyzed, countered, defeated. Elena made her decision. She opened the communication channel again. Justicar Thelmaran, she said. Your demonstration has been noted. However, we require time to organize the evacuation of 50,000 people. Our life support systems need reconfiguration. Give us 10 standard cycles to comply with your demands. Thelmaran considered this. The primitive was being reasonable now, as they always eventually were. Fear was the great teacher. 10 cycles, he agreed. At the end of that time I will return. If you are not assembled on the moon as commanded, I will burn your colony ship with everyone aboard. Consider this mercy. His vessel shimmered and vanished, departing as impossibly as it had arrived. The moment he was gone, Elena stood from her chair. Lieutenant Okonkwo, I want every sensor reading we have on that ship compiled and transmitted to Earth immediately. Use the quantum ansible, I don't care about the power cost. Ma'am, Earth is 40 light-years away. Even the ansible will take days for a response. I'm not waiting for a response, Elena said. I'm calling for help. Get me Fleet Command. Tell them we need the Ragnarok. Her communications officer, a gray-haired woman named Chen, looked up in shock. Captain, the Ragnarok is still experimental. It's never been tested in actual combat. And even if they deployed immediately, it would take weeks to reach us. Then we stall for weeks, Elena said firmly. Contact the other colony ships in Earth's diaspora. Tell them what happened here. Tell them we've encountered a hostile superior force that claims to rule the galaxy. And tell them that if we fall, they should run as far and as fast as they can. She walked to the forward viewport and stared out at the stars. Somewhere out there, the Justicar was probably laughing at the primitive humans who thought they could defy gods. But Elena had grown up on the stories of her ancestors. Stories of how humanity had faced empires and tyrants before, how they had stood against impossible odds and sometimes, just sometimes, had won. Ma'am? Okonkwo said hesitantly. Do you really think we can fight them? Elena remembered something her grandfather had told her long ago. He had been a soldier in the resource wars, had seen the worst humanity could do to itself and the best. Mija, he had said, humanity doesn't survive because we're the strongest or the smartest. We survive because we're too stubborn to quit. I don't know if we can fight them, she admitted to Okonkwo, but I know we won't go quietly. Get me everything we have on the Prometheus Protocol. The Prometheus Protocol, humanity's desperate contingency plan for encountering a hostile superior civilization. It had been developed by military theorists who understood a simple truth. Technology always had limits, and confidence could become arrogance. The protocol was built on historical examples. The Mongols had been superior warriors, but they had fallen. The British Empire had ruled the world, but it had crumbled. Every empire, no matter how powerful, eventually found someone who refused to bow. Elena spent the next hours reviewing the protocol, studying humanity's own history of asymmetric warfare. Guerrilla tactics, psychological operations, exploiting overconfidence. She looked at the sensor data on the Aari ship, at the way it moved with such casual arrogance, never taking evasive action because it had never needed to. On the 5th cycle, another message arrived. Not from Earth, but from one of the other human colony groups. They had encountered the Aari 2 years ago in a different sector. They had knelt. They had surrendered. Now they lived as slaves, their ships confiscated, their people scattered across mining operations on toxic worlds. Never again, Elena whispered. On the 8th cycle, the Ansible finally received a response from Earth. It was short, encrypted, for her eyes only. Captain Vasquez, UNS Ragnarok deploying immediately. ETA 40 days. Commander Marcus Chen in command. Hold position. Stall by any means necessary. Prometheus Protocol is authorized. Godspeed. 40 days. She had asked for 10 cycles and gotten them. Now she needed to stretch those 10 cycles into 40 days. Elena began making plans. Technical difficulties with the evacuation systems. Spiritual counseling sessions for 50,000 terrified colonists that needed to happen before they could face their new gods. Medical emergencies. Anything plausible. On the 10th cycle, Justicar Thelmaran returned as promised. His vessel appeared in a shimmer of impossible light, and his voice boomed across the communication channels. The time has expired. Present yourselves for judgment. Elena took a deep breath. Justicar, we have encountered complications. Our atmospheric processors are malfunctioning, and we cannot safely evacuate until repairs are complete. We request an extension of 15 additional cycles. The pause was longer this time. Thelmaran was beginning to suspect something, but his arrogance worked in humanity's favor. What could these primitives possibly be planning? They had no weapons that could harm him. They had no allies. They were alone and helpless. 5 cycles, he said finally. No more extensions. If you are not compliant at that time, I will begin destroying your cargo vessels. 1 every hour until you obey. The channel closed. Elena allowed herself a small smile. 5 more cycles. Then she would ask for 5 more after that. And if he started destroying cargo vessels, she would stall during each destruction, begging, pleading, buying minutes and hours. Because somewhere in the darkness between stars, the Ragnarok was coming. Humanity's answer to gods. A ship built without safety margins, crewed by volunteers, armed with weapons that pushed physics to the breaking point. Elena looked at the remaining escort ship, the Darwin, holding position near her vessel. Its crew knew they would probably die in the next few cycles. They stayed anyway. That was humanity. Stubborn, defiant, unwilling to bow even when kneeling would be so much easier. The stars belonged to the Aari. They had for 50,000 years. But humanity had a saying that Elena's grandfather had taught her, one that had echoed through their history from ancient times to the space age. From my cold, dead hands, she whispered to herself. The Justicar thought he was teaching them fear. He had no idea he was about to learn it. Commander Marcus Chen stood on the bridge of the UNS Ragnarok and stared at the tactical display. 40 days to reach the defiant hope. 40 days to prepare for a battle against an enemy that called themselves gods. 40 days that would probably not be enough. The Ragnarok was the first of its kind. Humanity's answer to a question they had hoped would never be asked. What do you do when you meet someone stronger than you in the vastness of space? The ship was massive, nearly 2 kilometers long, bristling with weapons that had never been tested in actual combat. railguns that could accelerate projectiles to 3% of light speed, nuclear-pumped lasers that required their own dedicated fusion reactors, EMP torpedoes designed to disrupt any electromagnetic system, and deep in the ship's core, the prototype quantum destabilizer, a weapon so experimental that even its designers were not entirely sure it would work. Marcus was 43 years old, which made him young for a ship commander. But the Ragnarok was not a normal ship, and this was not a normal mission. The crew were all volunteers. Every single one of them had signed up knowing they might never come home. 800 souls who had looked at the choice between safe assignments and possible suicide, and had chosen the latter. Marcus understood them because he was one of them. 5 years ago, his wife and daughter had been on the mining colony at Kepler Station when a reactor failure had destroyed the entire facility, 3,000 people dead, including everyone he had loved. He had volunteered for the Ragnarok the day it was announced, not because he wanted to die, but because he wanted his death to mean something. "Commander," his executive officer said, pulling him from his thoughts, Lieutenant Commander Sarah Okonkwo, sister to the tactical officer on the Defiant Hope, was the ship's second-in-command and its chief engineer. "We're ready to begin the FTL jump sequence. 40 days of continuous faster-than-light travel will push our drive systems to their absolute limits." "Push them," Marcus said simply. "Those colonists don't have 41 days. The Ragnarok's drives engaged and space itself twisted around the vessel. To an outside observer, the ship seemed to stretch like taffy and then vanish. Inside, the crew felt nothing more than a slight vibration. But Marcus knew what was happening. They were punching through the fabric of reality, traveling through dimensions that human minds could barely comprehend, moving at speeds that made Einstein weep. As they traveled, Marcus gathered his senior staff in the briefing room. The walls displayed everything they knew about the Aari, which was not much. Data from the Defiant Hope sensors, historical records from the other colony group that had surrendered, intercepted communications from dozens of species under Aari control. "Let's talk about gods," Marcus began, his voice carrying that particular tone of a teacher who was about to dismantle a myth. "The Aari believe they're divine. More importantly, they've convinced everyone else they're divine. 50,000 years of rule will do that. But here's what we know for certain. They bleed." He pulled up an image of an Aari vessel, the strange crystalline structure that seemed to defy physics. "Their ships are made of matter. Advanced matter structured in ways we don't understand yet, but still matter. Matter can be destroyed." It pulled up energy readings from Justikar Thelmaran's attack. "Their weapons are plasma-based, extremely focused, incredibly powerful. But plasma is just superheated gas. It has temperatures, vectors, energy requirements." His tactical officer, a scarred veteran named Rodriguez, leaned forward. "You're saying we can fight them?" "I'm saying they're not magic," Marcus corrected. "Advanced? Yes. Powerful? Absolutely. But not invincible. Everything has limits. Every technology has weaknesses. We just need to find them." The next 20 days were spent in analysis. The science team, led by Dr. Yuki Tanaka, worked around the clock studying the sensor data. They discovered that Aari shields operated on phase-shifted frequencies, creating a barrier that existed partially outside normal space. Powerful, yes, but the phase shifting created harmonics, interference patterns that could theoretically be exploited. Their energy beings were even more interesting. Dr. Tanaka's analysis suggested that the Aari had uploaded their consciousness into quantum matrices, allowing them to exist as pure energy. It was sophisticated, elegant, and billions of years beyond human technology, but it was still technology. And any computer system, no matter how advanced, could be hacked. "The problem," Dr. Tanaka explained during one briefing, "is that they've been unchallenged for so long, they've stopped innovating. Their tactics are ritualistic. Their ship movements follow patterns. They fight like they're performing a ceremony, not like they're in actual danger." Marcus saw the opportunity immediately. They've forgotten how to actually fight. They've been crushing ants for so long they don't remember what to do when the ant bites back. He began developing strategy. The Prometheus Protocol provided the framework. When facing a superior enemy, you attack their assumptions. The Aari assumed they were invincible. They assumed their enemies would be terrified. They assumed that a show of force would lead to immediate surrender. "We're going to attack all three assumptions at once," Marcus told his crew. "We're going to hit them hard enough to prove they can be hurt. We're going to show them that humans don't scare easily, and we're going to refuse surrender even when it looks like the smart option. The weapons teams worked on specialized ammunition for the railguns. The shells were designed to match the frequency of the Aari shields, hopefully allowing them to slip through or at least disrupt the barrier. The EMP torpedoes were modified to target quantum systems, their electromagnetic pulses tuned to cause maximum interference with the kind of advanced computing the Aari used. Meanwhile, Marcus drilled his crew relentlessly. They practiced evasive maneuvers, attack runs, damage control procedures. The Ragnarok was designed to take punishment, with triple-layered ablative armor that could burn away without compromising the hull. But Marcus knew that in a prolonged fight they would lose. The key was to make every second count. On day 30, they received an update from Captain Vasquez. Justicar Thelmaran had grown impatient with the delays and had begun systematically destroying cargo vessels. 10,000 colonists were dead. The message was brief, cold, reporting facts without emotion, but Marcus could read between the lines. Vasquez was holding, but she would not be able to hold much longer. Increase speed, Marcus ordered. I don't care if we burn out the drives. We pushed through. The Ragnarok accelerated, its engines glowing white-hot even in the emptiness of faster-than-light travel. The ship groaned and shuddered, metal expanding beyond its design tolerances. But it held, because it was human engineering, built with the assumption that sometimes you needed to push past safe limits. On day 38, they dropped out of FTL on the edge of the system. Marcus immediately ordered full stealth mode. The Ragnarok went dark, its hull covered in specialized materials that absorbed radiation across multiple spectrums. To the Aari sensors, it would be invisible, just another piece of debris drifting in space. The tactical display showed the situation clearly. The Defiant Hope and its remaining escort ship, the Darwin, were surrounded by 6 Aari vessels. One of them was larger than the others, clearly the Justicar's flagship. Even as Marcus watched, another cargo ship exploded silently in the void. How many colonists left? He asked quietly. 40,000, Okonkwo reported. 15 cargo ships destroyed. The Justicar is giving them one final chance to surrender. Marcus felt cold anger settle in his chest. 15 ships. 10,000 people. Murdered not in battle but as a lesson. To teach fear. To enforce obedience, all stations battle ready, he ordered. Weapons hot. Shields to full. We're going in. Sir, Rodriguez said carefully. We're 1 ship against 6, and their smallest vessel outguns us significantly. Then we'll have to be smarter than them, Marcus replied. They think they're gods. They think we're primitives who will break and run. Let's teach them what humans do when their backs are against the wall. He opened a channel to the entire ship. 800 crew members, most of them young, all of them volunteers. They deserved to know what they were about to face. This is Commander Chen, he said, his voice echoing through every corridor and compartment. In a few minutes, we're going to decloak directly behind the Aari flagship. They will have numerical superiority. They will have technological superiority. By every logical measure, we should lose this fight. But humanity has never been much for logic when it comes to survival. We are the species that crawled out of caves and reached for the stars. We are the species that looked at impossible odds and said, "Watch this." We are the species that turns desperation into a weapon and stubbornness into a shield. He paused, letting his words sink in. The Aari want us to see gods. Let's show them demons. All hands prepare for combat. The Ragnarok moved through space like a ghost, using the colony ships as cover to approach the Aari formation from behind. Marcus watched the tactical display, timing his move carefully. The Justicar's vessel was preparing to fire again, charging its weapons to destroy another cargo ship. Distance 5,000 kilometers, Rodriguez reported. We're in optimal firing range. Wait, Marcus said softly. 4,000 kilometers. Wait, 3,000 kilometers. Sir, if they detect us. Now, Marcus said. Decloak. All weapons fire. The Ragnarok appeared in the void like a nightmare made metal. Every weapon on the ship fired simultaneously. Railgun projectiles screamed across the distance at 3% of light speed. Nuclear-pumped lasers carved beams of concentrated energy through space. EMP torpedoes streaked toward their targets, their warheads primed to detonate in electromagnetic fury. The Justicar's sensors screamed warnings. For the first time in his 8,000-year existence, Thelmaran felt something he did not recognize. Later he would understand it was fear. In that moment, he only knew that something massive and hostile had appeared from nowhere, and it was trying to kill him. His shield snapped up automatically, the phase-shifted barriers materializing around his vessel. The first railgun round struck them and dispersed, their kinetic energy bleeding off into other dimensions. But there were so many. The barrage was relentless, overwhelming. The shields held, but they flickered under the assault. Then the lasers hit, concentrated beams of energy, each one powered by its own fusion reactor. They splashed across the shields like waves against a cliff, creating brilliant flares of light. The EMP torpedoes arrived last. They detonated in perfect synchronization, and for just a moment the Justicar's shields vanished. Not destroyed but disrupted, their quantum matrices unable to maintain phase coherence under such electromagnetic interference. In that instant, a single railgun round got through. It struck the flagship's hull at 3% of light speed. The impact released energy equivalent to a small nuclear weapon. Armor designed to withstand plasma streams cracked. Internal systems overloaded, and for the first time in millennia, an Athari vessel shuddered under actual damage. Marcus smiled coldly as alarms began blaring across his bridge. The Athari were returning fire now, and their response was devastating. Streams of plasma lanced across space, striking the Ragnarok with fury that could vaporize normal ships. The ablative armor did its job. The outer layer burned away, then the middle layer, metal turning to gas under impossible heat. But the inner layer held. The Ragnarok's hull remained intact. "Damage report," Marcus snapped. "Armor degraded by 40%. Starboard railgun offline. Minor casualties in Section 7. Continue firing. Target their shields exclusively. I want every EMP torpedo we have in the air." The battle devolved into brutal exchange. The Athari vessels moved to surround the Ragnarok, their formations perfect, their tactics textbook. But Marcus had expected this. He used the colony ships as obstacles, positioning the Ragnarok so that the Athari could not fire without risking their prizes. They wanted the humans alive for slavery. He was counting on that hesitation. "All power to forward shields," he ordered as another plasma stream approached. "Brace for impact." The hit rocked the ship. Systems overloaded across 3 decks, but they held. On the Defiant Hope, Captain Vasquez watched in awe as the human warship fought 6 Athari vessels to a standstill. It should have been impossible. It was impossible. And yet it was happening. "Captain," Lieutenant Okonkwo said, his voice shaking, "one of the Athari cruisers is breaking formation. It's moving toward us." Helena saw it on the tactical display. The cruiser was trying to use the colony ship as leverage, threatening to destroy it unless the Ragnarok surrendered. But before she could react, Marcus Chen's voice came across all frequencies. "Justicar Thelmoran," he said, his voice carrying across the void. "This is humanity's answer to your claims of divinity. This is what we do when someone tells us to kneel. We get up, we hit back, and we never ever surrender." The Ragnarok turned, presenting its broadside to the Justicar's flagship. Every remaining weapon locked on target. "Come and take us," Marcus finished, and the stars themselves seemed to hold their breath. Justicar Thelmoran had existed for 8,000 years. In all that time, he had never known doubt. The universe was orderly, predictable. The Athari commanded and lesser beings obeyed. It was the way things had always been, the way they would always be until now. The human warship hung in space before him like a nightmare made of metal and rage. It should have been destroyed by now. His 6 vessels had poured enough firepower to crack a moon into its hull. Yet it remained, wounded but defiant, its weapons still tracking his flagship with cold precision. "Impossible," Thelmoran whispered, his luminous form flickering with confusion. "No primitive vessel should withstand our divine fire." His second in command, a younger Aethari named Selvarin, pulsed with uncertainty. "Justicar, their technology is not as primitive as we believed. Their weapons operate on principles similar to our own, less refined but effective. Silence." Thelmoran's radiance flared bright enough to hurt. "They are insects. We are gods. The outcome is inevitable." But doubt had entered his consciousness like poison. The human vessel had hurt him, actually damaged his flagship. His sensors showed a breach in the outer hull. Systems offline, injuries among his crew. Such things were not supposed to happen to the Aethari. On the Ragnarok, Commander Marcus Chen studied the tactical display with the cold calculation of a man who knew he was already dead. The question was not whether he would die, but whether his death would matter. "Status report," he ordered, his voice steady despite the chaos around him. Lieutenant Commander Okonkwo worked her console with bleeding hands. Injured when a power conduit had exploded behind her station. Ablative armor down to 20% integrity. We've lost 3 railgun batteries. Forward shields are at 35%. Life support is stable, but we have casualties on 7 decks. How many dead? 216. Her voice cracked slightly. Another 80 injured. Marcus felt each death like a physical blow. 216 people who had trusted him, who had volunteered to follow him into hell. But he could not afford to mourn yet. There would be time for that later if there was a later. Their shields, he asked. Rodriguez checked his tactical sensors. Fluctuating. Our EMP torpedoes are working better than expected. Every time they fire, we hit them with another pulse and their shields take longer to recharge. It's like they've never had to deal with sustained electronic warfare before. Marcus felt a grim satisfaction. The Ithari were advanced, but they had grown complacent. When you had not faced a real challenge in 50,000 years, you stopped innovating. You stopped preparing for the unexpected. Launch another spread of EMP torpedoes, he ordered. All remaining birds. Then prepare the quantum destabilizer. Okonkwo looked up sharply. Sir, the destabilizer is untested. We don't know if it will work. We don't even know if it's safe for us to use. Then I guess we're about to find out, Marcus replied. Target the flagship. If we're going down, we're taking that pompous bastard with us. The EMP torpedoes launched, streaking across the void toward the Ithari formation. Thelmaran's vessels tried to intercept them with plasma fire, but the small missiles were fast and maneuverable. They wove through the defensive barrage and detonated in a cascading wave of electromagnetic fury. For a moment, all 6 Ithari vessels flickered, their shields disrupting simultaneously. It was only a second, maybe 2, but Marcus had been waiting for exactly that moment. Railguns full spread, all targets, he barked. Fire. The Ragnarok's remaining weapons spoke with thunder. Projectiles moving at 3% of light speed crossed the distance in heartbeats. Without their shields, the Aetheri vessels were vulnerable. Not helpless, their hulls were still incredibly advanced, but vulnerable. The smallest cruiser, the one that had been moving to threaten the Defiant Hope, took 3 direct hits. Its crystalline structure cracked like glass. Atmosphere vented from a dozen breaches. The vessel tumbled out of control, its systems failing. Across the Aethari Collective on 10,000 worlds, temple sensors registered the impossible. A godship, an eternal vessel of the Aetheri, was dying. Priests fell to their knees in confusion. Believers wept. And in the hearts of slaves who had served for generations, a dangerous thought took root. If the Aethari could be hurt, were they really gods at all? Thelmaran watched his escort vessel break apart, and felt something primal and terrible surge through his consciousness. Not just anger, terror, real, genuine terror, the kind of fear that comes when everything you believed about the universe suddenly proves false. Call for reinforcements, he commanded. Alert the High Conclave. Tell them what? Selvarin interrupted, his own form pulsing with barely controlled panic. That we are losing to primitives? That our divinity is a lie? We are not losing, Thelmaran roared. We are gods. We are eternal. But even as he spoke the words, he activated his flagship's most powerful weapon. The Sundering Lance, a device that could tear apart planetary cores, had not been used in warfare for millennia. It was too powerful, too destructive. It was a weapon of absolute last resort. The lance began charging, drawing power from every system on the flagship. It would take 90 seconds to reach full capacity. 90 seconds during which the ship would be vulnerable. Shields down, weapons offline. Target the colony fleet, Thelmaran ordered. When the lance fires, it will vaporize all of them at once. 50,000 primitives erased in an instant. Then these insects on their warship will understand the price of defiance. Marcus saw the energy readings spike on his tactical display. Dr. Tanaka's voice came over the intercom, breathless and terrified. Commander, the flagship is charging some kind of massive weapon. Energy levels are off the scale. If that thing fires, everything within 10,000 kilometers will be destroyed, including the colony fleet. Marcus felt ice in his veins. 50,000 civilians, men, women, children, all about to die because he had dared to fight back. For a moment, he almost ordered a retreat. The Ragnarok could activate its FTL drive and escape. They had hurt the Aetheri, proven they were not invincible. Maybe that would be enough. Then he remembered the faces of his wife and daughter, dead in the Kepler disaster. Remembered the 200 crew members who had died today trusting his command. remembered every human throughout history who had stood against impossible odds because surrender was worse than death. All power to engines, he said quietly. Set course directly for the flagship. Ramming speed, the bridge fell silent. Everyone understood what he was ordering. A suicide run. The Ragnarok would smash itself against the Aari vessel, hopefully disrupting the weapon before it could fire. Sir, Okonkwo said, her voice steady now. If we're going out, let's make it count. I can rig the quantum destabilizer to detonate on impact. It should create a cascade reaction in their power matrix. Marcus looked at his crew. Young faces, old faces, all of them knowing they were about to die. Not one of them looked away. Not one of them objected. Do it, he ordered. All hands brace for impact. It's been an honor serving with you. The Ragnarok's engines flared to full power, pushing the massive vessel forward with brutal acceleration. The crew felt the G-forces even through the inertial dampeners. On every deck, people grabbed onto whatever was available, said quick prayers to whatever gods they still believed in, and waited for the end. Thelmaran saw the human ship accelerating toward him and felt shock override his fear. They were not running. They were attacking. Even now, facing certain death, they were attacking. Evasive maneuvers, he screamed. But his flagship was still charging the sundering lance. Every system was dedicated to the weapon. Engines were offline. Shields were down. The mighty vessel hung in space like a sitting target. The Ragnarok closed the distance in seconds. Marcus stood on his bridge, hands gripping his command chair, watching the Aari flagship grow larger on the view screen. He thought about Earth, about humanity, about all the people who would never know what happened here today. Tell them we didn't kneel, he said to no one in particular. The two ships collided with the force of a nuclear explosion. The Ragnarok's reinforced prow drove deep into the Aari flagship's crystalline hull. Metal screamed. Energy systems overloaded, and deep in the human ship's core, the quantum destabilizer activated. The device had been designed to disrupt quantum matrices, to create instability in the kind of advanced systems the Aari used. But the scientists had never tested it against an active power core. They had never seen what happened when you introduced quantum chaos into a system that was already charging a planet-killing weapon. The result was catastrophic. The sundering lance's energy, with nowhere to go, began to feed back into the flagship's own systems. The quantum destabilizer amplified the effect, creating cascading failures throughout the vessel. Power conduits exploded. The crystalline hull began to crack from internal pressure. Thelmaran had one moment to realize what was happening. One moment to understand that his own weapon was about to consume him. One moment to know that he had been wrong, that the Aari were not gods, had never been gods, were just another species that had grown too arrogant to remember their mortality. Then the flagship's core went critical. The explosion was visible from the colony fleet, a burst of light so bright it briefly outshone the system's star. Debris scattered in every direction, pieces of both ships tumbling through space. The shockwave knocked the remaining Aari vessels back, their shields barely absorbing the impact. On the Defiant Hope, Captain Elena Vasquez stared at the tactical display in horror and awe. The sensors showed nothing but an expanding cloud of debris where the two flagships had been. "Are there any survivors?" she asked, her voice hoarse. Lieutenant Okonkwo worked his console frantically, scanning the debris field. "I'm not reading any life signs. Captain, the Ragnarok sacrificed itself. They're gone." Elena felt tears on her cheeks. 800 people. 800 volunteers who had flown across 40 light-years to save colonists they had never met. And now they were dead, their atoms scattered across the void. "Sir," Okonkwo said suddenly, his voice rising. "Wait, I'm getting something." There's a large piece of debris still intact. Its reading is part of the Ragnarok's engineering section, and I'm detecting life signs. Elena's head snapped up. "How many?" "I can't tell. The readings are intermittent, but there's definitely someone alive in there." The Defiant Hope's remaining escort, the Darwin, immediately began moving toward the debris field. The other Aari vessels did not interfere. They hung in space, their sensors fixed on the expanding cloud of destruction processing the impossible. Their leader was dead. A godship had been destroyed. By primitives, by insects, by beings they had dismissed as beneath notice. On the Aari homeworld, the High Conclave felt Thelmaran's death through the quantum network that connected all their kind. High Archon Zalthran's radiance dimmed with shock. "This cannot be," he whispered. The Justicar was immortal, He was eternal. Archon Velshara the pragmatist pulsed with cold calculation. He was advanced, not divine. There is a difference. One we have forgotten. Heresy! Archon Krenthos blazed with fury. The eternal dominion is absolute. We are gods made manifest. Gods do not die, Velshara said quietly. The humans just proved that we can. We must adapt or we will be next. But Krenthos was not listening. Already he was calling for the Armada, for 200 warships to descend upon the humans and erase them from existence. Not as a measured response, but as vengeance, as proof that the old order still held. In the debris field, rescue crews from the Darwin cut through twisted metal to reach the survivors. They found Commander Marcus Chen in the auxiliary bridge, trapped under a collapsed bulkhead, barely conscious but alive. Around him, 63 other crew members had survived, sealed in the one section that had remained intact. As they pulled him free, Marcus looked up at the rescue worker and managed a weak smile. "Did we get him?" he asked. The rescue worker nodded, tears streaming down her face. "You got him, sir. You killed a god." Marcus closed his eyes. 216 dead on the Ragnarok, 37 more who would not survive their injuries. But 50,000 colonists lived, and the galaxy now knew the truth. Gods could bleed, gods could die, and humanity would never kneel again. News traveled fast in a galaxy connected by quantum communication networks. Within hours of Justicar Thelmoran's death, every world under Aari control knew what had happened. Within days, the entire galactic community had heard the impossible story. A human warship had destroyed a godship in single combat. On the mining world of Corvin III, a slave named Teshka heard the news while hauling ore in the crushing heat. She dropped her load, staring at the sky with eyes that had not held hope in 20 years. Her overseer, an Athari enforcer, raised his energy weapon to punish her insolence. But his hand trembled. For the first time in his 800-year life, he felt uncertain. On the trading station of Vel Nexus, merchants who had paid tribute to the Athari for generations suddenly began whispering in back rooms. What if the protection they paid for was not worth the cost? What if the eternal rulers were not so eternal after all? On 100 agricultural worlds, priests stood before their temples and tried to explain to confused believers how a god could die. Some claimed it was a test, a divine trial. Others fell silent, their faith cracking like old stone. And on the Athari homeworld, the High Conclave faced their first true crisis in 50,000 years. The chamber of the Eternal Dominion glowed, with agitated light as the Archons argued with a fury that would have been unthinkable a week ago. High Archon Zalthran tried to maintain order, but even his voice had lost its certainty. The human threat must be eliminated, Archon Krenthos declared, his form blazing red with rage. We will send the Armada. 200 warships will descend upon their colonies and reduce them to atoms. We will make an example so terrible that no species will ever dare defy us again. And what happens? Archon Velshara asked coolly. When they destroy some of those 200 ships as well? What happens when our subjects see that even an Armada can be hurt? Impossible! Krenthos flared brighter. One warship caught us by surprise. 200 will overwhelm any defense they can muster. Thelmoran thought 6 ships would be enough, Velshara pointed out. He was wrong. He paid for that mistake with his existence. Zalthran intervened before the argument could escalate further. Velshara, what do you propose? The pragmatist dimmed her radiance, a sign of deep thought. I propose we acknowledge reality. The humans have proven they can fight. More importantly, they have proven that we are not divine. That knowledge is now spreading across the galaxy. We can kill the humans, but we cannot kill the idea they have planted. Heresy, Krenthos hissed. Our divinity is absolute. It is the foundation of our rule. Our technology is our foundation, Velshara corrected. Divinity was simply the narrative we wrapped around it. A useful narrative, I admit. But narratives can change. We must adapt or face extinction. Adapt? Zalthran's form flickered with uncertainty. How does one adapt to mortality? Velshara did not answer immediately. She was thinking about something she had not considered in millennia, her own origins, somewhere in their ancient past before they had become energy beings, before they had conquered the stars. The Ithari had been mortal. They had struggled, innovated, fought for survival. Somehow, in the long comfort of supremacy, they had forgotten those lessons. "We negotiate," she said finally. "We offer the humans a place in the galactic order, as equals, not slaves." The chamber erupted in outraged light. Even Zalthran recoiled at the suggestion. Equals. The Ithari had no equals. They were above all others. That was the natural order. But Velshara stood firm. "The alternative is war. A war we may not win, and even if we do win, we will have taught every species in the galaxy that we can be fought. Rebellions will spread. Our empire will fracture. We will spend the next 1,000 years putting down uprisings instead of ruling in peace." Krenthos pulsed with fury. "Then let there be war. Let the humans and any who support them burn. The eternal dominion will endure." The vote was close, but the hardliners won. Krenthos was given command of the Armada with a single mandate: destroy humanity's colonies, show no mercy, and restore fear to the hearts of all who had dared to question Ithari supremacy. Velshara watched the decision with growing dread. They were about to make a catastrophic mistake, one driven by pride rather than logic. But the conclave had spoken, and she was bound to obey. Or was she? Back in human space, Commander Marcus Chen was recovering in the medical bay of the Defiant Hope. His injuries were severe: 3 broken ribs, a punctured lung, radiation burns across 40% of his body. But he was alive, and so were 63 of his crew. The rest of the Ragnarok's complement, 737 souls, had died when the ship collided with the Ithari flagship. Captain Elena Vasquez visited him daily, bringing reports and updates. The colony fleet was safe for now, but Earth had received their data on the battle and was already preparing for retaliation. "How long until they come for us?" Marcus asked, his voice rough from the breathing tube they had only removed that morning. "Unknown," Elena admitted. "But Earth is not waiting to find out. They have authorized the construction of 50 more Ragnarok-class warships. The shipyards are working around the clock." Marcus closed his eyes. 50 ships, against an empire that had ruled for 50,000 years. It would not be enough. It could never be enough. "We need allies," he said. "Other species under Ithari control. If they rise up at the same time—" "That's already happening," Elena interrupted, allowing herself a small smile. "We have been receiving messages from resistance groups across the galaxy. Apparently, word of your battle has inspired them. There are uprisings on a dozen worlds. Nothing organized yet, but the Ithari are having to divert resources to deal with them." Marcus felt a flicker of hope. Maybe, just maybe, humanity would not have to fight alone. 3 weeks later, the Ansible received a message from Earth. It was encrypted with the highest level protocols, marked for Marcus's eyes only. He read it twice, not quite believing what he was seeing. "Captain Vasquez," he called, his voice urgent. "I need you to see this." Elena read the message and went pale. "Is this confirmed?" "It's from Earth Intelligence. They have been monitoring Ithari communications. Apparently, someone in their government is leaking information to us. Complete. Technical specifications for their ships, weapons, defenses, everything." Why would one of them help us? Marcus thought about that. Maybe not all of them believe they're gods anymore. Maybe some of them remember what it's like to face an uncertain future and want to survive it. The leaked information was a treasure trove. Earth scientists pored over it, finding weaknesses in Ithari technology that would have taken decades to discover otherwise. The shields had a specific frequency vulnerability. The weapons had a recharge cycle that could be exploited. Even the quantum matrices that housed their consciousness had failsafes that could be triggered. More importantly, the leak included information about the Armada. 200 warships, departure date in 60 days, estimated arrival at the human colonies in 90 days total. Earth mobilized for total war. Every shipyard, every factory, every resource was dedicated to building the fleet. Engineers worked until they collapsed. Volunteers signed up by the millions. Humanity had a talent for coming together when faced with extinction. But even with the leaked information, Even with frantic preparation, they could only complete 12 new Ragnarok-class vessels in time, 13 ships total, counting the repairs to the original Ragnarok, versus 200 Aari warships. The math was brutal. Marcus was promoted to fleet commander, given authority over all 13 vessels. His crew, the survivors from the first battle, were distributed among the new ships as experienced combat veterans. They trained the new crews, passing on hard-won lessons about fighting an enemy that had ruled the stars since before human civilization existed. On day 89, the human fleet gathered at the colony world designated New Terra, 13 warships facing the largest military deployment the Aari had made in 10,000 years. Behind them, the colony fleet with its 50,000 civilians. No evacuation was possible, nowhere to run. Marcus stood on the bridge of the rebuilt Ragnarok and addressed his fleet over the open channel. 13 ships, 6,500 crew members, all volunteers, all knowing the odds. In a few hours, he began, we're going to face an enemy that has never lost a war. They have technology that makes ours look like stone tools. They have the confidence of 50,000 years of supremacy. By every measure, they should crush us like insects. He paused, letting the weight of those words settle. But they forgot something. They forgot what it's like to fight for survival. They forgot what it's like to face an enemy that refuses to quit. They forgot that sometimes, the side with the better weapons loses to the side with the stronger will. He looked at the faces of his bridge crew, saw the fear and determination in equal measure. Humanity has been the underdog before. We started as prey animals on the African savanna. We had no claws, no fangs, no armor. We should have been eaten to extinction. Instead, we learned to use tools, to work together, to never give up even when giving up was the smart choice. That stubbornness, that refusal to accept our place at the bottom of the food chain, brought us from caves to the stars. He straightened, his voice growing stronger. The Aari want us to see gods. They want us to despair. They want us to kneel. But we are humans, and we don't kneel. We stand, we fight, and if we die on our feet, taking as many of them with us as we can. Marcus looked at the tactical display, at the 13 green icons representing his fleet. All ships prepare for combat. When the Armada arrives, we show them what happens when you back humanity into a corner. We show them why you should never underestimate the species that turned stubbornness into an art form. 6,500 voices answered as one. For humanity. The Ansible carried that cry back to Earth, where billions listened in fear and pride. Across the galaxy, slaves in their chains heard it and felt something they had not felt in generations. Hope. And in the High Conclave, Archon Velshara made her decision. She could not stop the Armada, but she could give the humans every advantage possible. She began transmitting everything she knew, tactical formations, command structures, which ships had the most experienced crews, and which were staffed by young zealots who had never faced real combat. If the Eternal Dominion would not adapt, if they insisted on learning through blood and fire, then she would make sure the lesson was as painful as possible. Sometimes, to save something, you had to be willing to break it first. On day 90, the sensors detected the Armada's arrival. 200 warships dropping out of faster-than-light travel in perfect formation. A fleet that could conquer worlds, reduce planets to slag, enforce the will of gods made manifest, and standing between them and the colonies, 13 human vessels that should not have been able to even scratch their paint. Marcus looked at the tactical display and felt his heart hammering in his chest. This was it. The moment that would decide humanity's future. They would either prove they belonged among the stars or they would be erased from existence. All ships, he said calmly. Engage the enemy. Space erupted into war. The Armada commander, High Justicar Corvalin, watched the human fleet on his sensors with something between contempt and curiosity. 13 vessels against 200. The primitives were either incredibly brave or incredibly stupid. He suspected the latter. Corvalin had existed for 12,000 years, longer than most Aari. He had overseen the subjugation of 50 worlds, crushed a dozen rebellions, and never once questioned his divine right to rule. The death of Thelmaran had shaken many in the collective, but not him. Thelmaran had been careless, overconfident. Corvalin would not make the same mistake. Forward elements, assume attack formation, he commanded. We will sweep them aside in a single pass. Then we reduce the colony worlds to dust. But as his fleet began to move, something unexpected happened. The human vessels did not wait to receive the attack. They scattered, breaking formation in a dozen different directions. Corvalin frowned, his luminous form flickering with confusion. What are they doing? That formation has no tactical value. His tactical officer, a veteran named Ren Shara, studied the patterns. Commander, I believe they are using the asteroid field as cover. They are moving to make our numerical advantage less relevant. Irrelevant, Corvalin declared. Numbers are absolute. Pursue them. Destroy them one by one if necessary. The armada split into hunting groups, 20 ships chasing each human vessel, 20 more remaining in reserve. It was overwhelming force applied with mathematical precision. Each human ship would face 20-to-1 odds. Simple, efficient, inevitable. But the humans had no intention of fighting fair. The Ragnarok led 50 Ithari vessels deep into an asteroid field. Weaving between the tumbling rocks with desperate agility, the Ithari ships followed, their superior sensors tracking the humans even through the debris. They fired plasma streams, but the asteroids absorbed most of the shots. Marcus watched his sensors counting down. The Ithari were so focused on pursuing him that they had not noticed the trap. Embedded in the asteroids were mining charges, hundreds of them, all remotely detonated. The colony fleet had been using this field for resource extraction. Now it would be used for something else. Detonate, Marcus ordered. Space lit up with synchronized explosions. Asteroids shattered into shrapnel moving at killing velocities. The lead Athari vessels took the full force of the blast, their shields overloading under the sudden barrage. 3 ships lost containment immediately, their hulls breaching. 7 more were damaged, trailing atmosphere and debris. Before the Ithari could recover, the Ragnarok reversed course and charged back into them, railguns blazing. The confused enemy vessels tried to reorganize, but the asteroid field limited their maneuverability. Marcus had turned their strength into a weakness. Across the battlefield, similar scenes played out. The human captains used every trick they could imagine. One ship led its pursuers past the colony fleet, where the civilian vessels fired their mining lasers, weak weapons against warships, but enough to disrupt shields when combined with the Ragnarok-class vessels' heavier firepower. Another captain, Commander Zhao of the Defiance, flew her ship directly toward the system's sun, pushing her heat shields to the absolute limit. The Athari ships followed, but their technology was optimized for the cold of deep space. 10 of them overheated and shut down before they could withdraw. Zhao turned and destroyed them while they were helpless. The Spartacus, under Captain Okafor, used the leaked information to target specific ships. The Athari vessels with inexperienced crews, the ones that had not seen combat in centuries. They went down easier, their captains making mistakes that veterans would never have made. But the cost was terrible. The Valkyrie took concentrated fire from 30 ships and simply ceased to exist. Her 500 crew vaporized in an instant. The Fearless lost her engines and drifted helpless until plasma fire tore her apart. The Indomitable, badly damaged, rammed an Athari cruiser in a final act of defiance, taking them both to oblivion. Within the first hour, humanity had lost 4 ships, but the Athari had lost 35. The math was still brutal, but it was no longer impossible. Corvalin watched his tactical display with growing disbelief. How were they losing ships? His force was technologically superior. His vessels were divinely empowered, yet somehow the primitives were killing his fleet. All units regroup, he ordered. No more pursuit. We form a wall and advance together. Let them come to us. But the humans had no intention of obliging him. They continued to strike and fade, appearing from nowhere to launch devastating attacks and then vanishing back into the chaos of the battlefield. They used debris fields, sensor shadows, even the radiation from their own damaged ships to mask their movements. Marcus was everywhere, his flagship holding together through sheer force of will and engineering miracles. Lieutenant Commander Okonkwo worked wonders in the engine room, keeping systems online that should have failed hours ago. Dr. Tanaka coordinated the electronic warfare, using the leaked Athari data to jam their communications and disrupt their targeting. On the bridge, Marcus felt every hit like a physical blow. His ship groaned under the strain. Bulkheads cracked. Crew members died at their stations, but they held. Humanity held. Then the tide began to shift. Commander Zhao, brilliant and reckless, saw an opportunity. Corvalin's flagship was powerful but isolated, having advanced too far ahead of his protective screen. She transmitted a quick signal to the 3 nearest human vessels. Target the Armada commander. All weapons now. 4 human warships converged on the Aari flagship from different vectors. Corvalin's shields were strong, but even they could not handle simultaneous attack from 4 directions. Railgun rounds slipped through. Nuclear-pumped lasers found weak points. EMP torpedoes disrupted his power systems at critical moments. Corvalin felt something he had not experienced in 12,000 years. Fear. Real primal fear. His ship was dying around him. Systems failed. Crew members screamed. And for the first time he understood what Thelmaran must have felt in his final moments. Challenge the commander. Marcus transmitted on all frequencies. Single combat. Your flagship against mine. If you win, we surrender. If I win, you withdraw. It was a desperate gambit, one that violated every rule of warfare. But Corvalin, his pride wounded and his fear growing, accepted. The Aari believed in honor in ritual. A duel was something they understood. Agreed, he replied. All ships cease fire. Witness as I destroy this primitive personally. The 2 flagships faced each other across empty space. Around them, nearly 300 vessels held position, watching. On 1,000 worlds, beings tuned their sensors to this moment. The outcome of this duel would shape galactic history. Marcus knew he was outmatched. Corvalin's flagship was larger, more powerful, and largely undamaged. The Ragnarok was held together by emergency welds and the prayers of its crew. But Marcus had one advantage: he had nothing to lose. All power to weapons, he ordered. We're going to hit him with everything at once and hope it's enough. The duel began with both ships firing simultaneously. Plasma met railgun fire in the void between them. Shields flared under impossible stress. The Ragnarok shuddered as hit after hit struck home. Marcus felt the ship dying under him. Commander, Okonkwo called from engineering, her voice strained. The reactor is going critical. I can't stop it. Marcus felt time slow down. The reactor was failing. When it went, it would take the entire ship with it. He had maybe 90 seconds before the explosion. 90 seconds. Not enough time to evacuate. Not enough time to win a conventional fight. But maybe, just maybe, enough time for one last desperate move. All hands abandon ship, he ordered. Get to the escape pods. That's an order. Sir, we're in the middle of combat, Rodriguez protested. If we abandon ship now, you'll live, Marcus interrupted. That's more important than this ship. I'm staying to make sure the reactor detonates at exactly the right moment. Everyone else go, now. Okonkwo's voice came over the intercom, filled with anguish. Marcus, don't do this. We can... That's an order, Sarah, he said gently. Take care of them. Tell Earth what happened here. Make sure people remember that we didn't kneel. He cut the channel before she could respond. Around him, the bridge crew hesitated, but military discipline won out. They abandoned their stations, heading for the escape pods. Marcus waited until the last one left, then locked the bridge doors behind them. He was alone now. Just him and his dying ship, facing a foe that called itself a god. Marcus aimed the Ragnarok directly at the Aari flagship and pushed the engines to full. The distance closed rapidly. Corvalin, realizing what the human intended, tried to back away, but his ship was massive, built for power rather than agility. You are insane, Corvalin transmitted. You will die. I know, Marcus replied calmly. But you're coming with me, and when 200 ships see their commander killed by a suicidal primitive, they'll finally understand. You're not gods. You're just old, arrogant, and out of practice. The reactor began its final cascade. Marcus felt the deck heating under his feet, felt the ship shaking itself apart. He kept his hands on the helm, steering the Ragnarok true. For my wife and daughter, he whispered. For the 700 who died with me. For every human who ever refused to bow. This is our answer. The ships collided at the exact moment the reactor exploded. The detonation was catastrophic, a burst of energy equivalent to a solar flare. Corvalin's flagship, its shields already weakened from combat, could not withstand the blast at point-blank range. The hull cracked. The quantum matrix housing his consciousness shattered. High Justicar Corvalin, who had existed for 12,000 years, who had believed himself eternal, experienced his final thought. These humans had been right. He was not a god. He had never been a god. The explosion cleared. Where 2 flagships had been, now only debris remained. The Aari Armada hung in space, leaderless and shocked. They had just watched their commander die in single combat with a primitive. The impossible had happened twice now. On the Defiant Hope, Captain Elena Vasquez watched the sensors and wept. Marcus Chen was gone. The Godslayer had killed a second god and paid with his life. All human vessels, she transmitted, her voice breaking. Commander Chen is down. I'm taking tactical command. All ships, continue the attack! But before the battle could resume, something unexpected happened. One of the Athari vessels, a large cruiser, broke formation and moved between the two fleets. A voice transmitted on all frequencies. Female speaking in perfect human English, attention all vessels. This is Archon Velshara considered the terms. They were harsh, would fundamentally reshape the Athari collective. But they were also fair. More fair than the Athari had been to anyone else in 50 millennia. Agreed, she said. I will present these terms to the High Conclave. I believe I can convince them, especially after they learn how many ships we lost today. The ceasefire held. The Athari armada withdrew, limping back toward their territory with their dead and wounded. The human fleet remained, battered but unbroken, guarding the colonies they had paid so dearly to protect. In the days that followed, the galaxy transformed. On world after world, slaves rose up when they heard the news. The Athari, divided and demoralized, could not stop them. Some worlds won their freedom through violence. Others negotiated their independence. A few chose to remain with the collective, but as partners rather than subjects. The High Conclave fractured. Krenthos and his hardline faction refused to accept the new order and retreated to a handful of core worlds, still claiming divinity to any who would listen. Their numbers dwindled as younger Athari, ones who had never believed the mythology, left to explore a galaxy that suddenly held possibilities instead of stagnant certainty. Southren, the old High Archon, stepped down from leadership. He was tired, he admitted, tired of pretending to be something he was not. He spent his final centuries in meditation, trying to remember what the Athari had been before they convinced themselves they were gods. Velshara became the de facto leader of the reformed Athari collective. She guided her people through the painful transition from masters to equals. It was not easy. Many Athari struggled with their new mortality, their new limitations. But slowly, gradually, they began to remember what it felt like to strive, to grow, to face an uncertain future with hope rather than arrogant certainty. Earth held a memorial service for Commander Marcus Chen and all who had fallen in the battle. 5,317 names were read aloud, each one a volunteer who had chosen to stand rather than kneel. Marcus was awarded humanity's highest honor posthumously, though everyone agreed he would have hated the ceremony. His body was never recovered. It had been vaporized in the reactor explosion. But Captain Elena Vasquez ensured that every human colony in the galaxy had a monument to the Ragnarok and her crew. The inscriptions were simple. They refused to kneel. 50 years passed. The galaxy changed in ways no one could have predicted. Humanity expanded, establishing colonies on 100 worlds. But they did not conquer. They traded, negotiated, built alliances. The Prometheus Protocol became required study in every military academy, not as a blueprint for war, but as a reminder that sometimes the best way to win was to show your enemy they could not afford victory. The Athari, humbled and reformed, became humanity's cautious allies. Velshara had been right, they needed each other. The Athari had technology and knowledge accumulated over millennia. Humanity had adaptability and innovation born from constant struggle. Together they made each other stronger. Trade routes flourished. Cultural exchanges happened. Young Athari studied on Earth, learning human history with its endless cycle of empires rising and falling. Young humans studied on Athar Prime, learning technologies that seemed like magic but were really just very advanced science. The former slave species, now free, built their own civilizations. Some thrived. Others struggled. But all of them had the chance to determine their own futures, and that was worth more than any amount of imposed order. On the 50th anniversary of the Battle of New Terra, an old woman stood before the monument on the colony world. Captain Elena Vasquez, now Admiral Vasquez, retired and gray-haired, placed flowers at the base of the memorial. Around her, thousands had gathered for the ceremony. I knew Marcus Chen, she told the crowd. He was not perfect. He was haunted by loss, driven by anger, and absolutely refused to accept the word impossible. When the Aetheri told him to kneel, he chose to stand. When they told him he would die, he chose to make his death matter. She looked up at the monument, at the names carved in stone, The Athari called themselves gods. Marcus showed them they were wrong. But he did something more important than that. He showed the entire galaxy that no one is too powerful to be challenged. That every empire, no matter how old or advanced, is just one generation away from collapse if they forget how to adapt. She paused, feeling the weight of her years. We don't worship Marcus. We don't build temples to the Ragnarok's crew, because they did not fight to become gods themselves. They fought to prove that there are no gods, only beings trying their best to survive in a universe that does not care about their claims to divinity. The crowd was silent, reflecting on her words. 50 years ago, humanity was alone and desperate. Today we have allies. We have trade partners. We have respect. Not because we conquered anyone, but because we refused to be conquered. That is Marcus's legacy. That is what all those who died that day gave us. Elena turned to leave, then stopped and looked back at the monument one more time. Thank you, old friend, she whispered. We didn't kneel. We never will. As she walked away, a small child approached the monument. She was Athari, her form glowing with the soft blue radiance of youth. Her parents, a reformed family who had rejected the old ways, had brought her to learn about history. Mother, the child asked, her voice curious rather than afraid. Were we really that bad? Did we really think we were gods? Her mother, who had lived through the transition, knelt beside her daughter. Yes, little one. We believed our own mythology. We stopped questioning, stopped growing. We became stagnant. What changed? The child asked. Her mother pointed to the names on the monument. These humans changed everything. They showed us that survival requires humility, that advancement requires acknowledging your limits, that true immortality comes not from never dying, but from building something that outlasts you. The child thought about this, her young mind processing concepts that would have been heresy a generation ago. I want to be like them when I grow up, she said finally, brave and stubborn and refusing to give up. Her mother smiled, a gesture she had learned from humans. Then you will honor them better than any monument could. Across the galaxy, on 1,000 worlds, similar conversations were happening. The old order had passed. The age of false gods had ended. In its place, something new was being born. Not perfect, not utopian, but honest. A galactic civilization built on mutual respect rather than enforced worship. And somewhere in the depths of space, new threats were stirring. Things from dark space, ancient and hungry, drawn by the energy signatures of advanced civilizations. They would come eventually, as such things always did. But when they arrived, they would not find a galaxy divided between masters and slaves. They would find allies who had learned to stand together. They would find humans who had proven that stubbornness could defeat supremacy. And they would find reformed Athari who had remembered that true strength came from adaptation, not stagnation. The age of humanity had begun, not through conquest but through defiance, not by claiming divinity but by denying it to all others. The galaxy had learned a simple lesson, written in the stars by the sacrifice of 800 volunteers. There are no gods in the void. Only those brave enough to light a fire in the darkness. And humanity, stubborn and fragile and absolutely refusing to quit, had proven they would burn bright enough to be seen across the entire galaxy. Commander Marcus Chen never knew what his sacrifice would build. He never saw the alliance between former enemies. He never witnessed the 1,000 freed worlds or the children, human and alien alike, who grew up learning that no one was born to kneel. But in the end, perhaps that was fitting. Heroes rarely see the world they create. They only see the moment they stand in, the choice they must make, the stand they must take. Marcus saw a fleet of gods threatening innocence. He chose to fight. He chose to stand. He chose to show the galaxy that humanity's greatest weapon was not technology or tactics. It was the absolute refusal to accept defeat, even when defeat was certain. Especially when defeat was certain, that stubbornness, that magnificent defiance had changed everything. And across the stars, in academies and schools, in military briefings and diplomatic meetings, people learned the story. They learned about the day gods died. They learned about the fleet that should have lost but refused to. They learned about Commander Marcus Chen and the 800 souls who followed him into the fire. And they learned the most important lesson of all. In the vast, cold universe, survival belongs not to the strongest or the oldest or the most advanced. It belongs to those who adapt, to those who question, to those who refuse to bow. The monument on New Terra bore a simple inscription beneath the names. 5 words that captured everything humanity had taught the galaxy. We stood. We fought. We endured. And in the end, that was enough. Shara of the Aari Collective. I am ordering all Aari forces to cease fire immediately. Chaos erupted on the Aari command channel. You have no authority here, one captain protested. The High Conclave ordered. The High Conclave is wrong, Velshara interrupted. I have been sending tactical information to the humans. I have been undermining this battle from the start. Because I understood something the rest of our kind has forgotten. Evolution requires adaptation. Survival requires change, and pride always comes before extinction. She paused, letting her words sink in. The humans have destroyed 2 Armada commanders. They have cost us nearly 80 ships. They have proven they can fight us to a standstill despite overwhelming odds. If we continue this war, we may win, but we will be weakened. And while we bleed ourselves against humanity, every slave species in the galaxy will rise up. We will spend the next 1,000 years fighting rebellions on every world we control. Another pause. When she spoke again, her voice was different. Not commanding, but almost pleading. Or we can do something we have not done in 50,000 years. We can negotiate. We can admit that we are not gods, never were gods, and that the galaxy is large enough for multiple powers to coexist. The Aari fleet did not respond immediately. They were processing the impossible. One of their own archons, a member of the High Conclave, had betrayed them. But she had also spoken a truth many of them had been afraid to acknowledge. Finally, one of the cruiser captains spoke. If we accept this, what becomes of the Eternal Dominion? It evolves, Velshara said simply. Or it dies. Those are the only options that ever existed. We simply forgot that truth in our long comfort. She turned her attention to the human fleet. Captain Vasquez, I propose a ceasefire. Immediate halt to all hostilities. We will withdraw our forces. In return, I ask only that you give us time to restructure our society, to transition from conquerors to partners in galactic civilization. Elena looked at her tactical display. 9 human ships remained, all damaged. Maybe 3,000 crew still alive. They had paid such a terrible price. The temptation to refuse, to fight until one side or the other was extinct, was almost overwhelming. But she thought about Marcus, about his final act. He had not just fought to kill. He had fought to teach, to show the Aari that humanity would not be conquered. Mission accomplished. The lesson had been learned. Ceasefire accepted, she said finally. But we have conditions. All human slaves are released immediately. All species under your control are given the option of independence. And you provide full technological exchange, no secrets, no superiority. And well,